we think we know a lot. We have satellites that see a car from space. We have computers that fit in our pockets and connect us to everything. We can map the human genome. But look back, just a little way back, and the certainties disappear. They are replaced by stone, by earth, by questions that have no easy answers. All over the world, there are places built by ancient people. People with no steel tools, no engines, no written language to pass down complex plans. Yet they built things that have outlasted empires. They moved stones that weigh as much as airplanes. They carved hillsides into pictures you can only see from the sky. They aligned massive structures to the sun and stars with a precision that baffles us. And they did it for reasons we can only guess at. These were not just houses or forts, they were something more. They feel different. They were places for rituals. For ceremonies we can't imagine. For beliefs that are lost to time, the archaeologists dig. They measure, they analyze, they propose theory. But for many of these sites, the core mystery remains. It's not just about how they built them. The real puzzle is why. What drove entire societies to pour generations of effort into these monumental projects? What were they trying to achieve? What gods were they trying to please? What did they fear? What did they hope for? These ancient ritual sites are not just relics, they are challenges. They challenge our idea of progress, they challenge our understanding of the human mind. They are giant, silent questions written in stone, and they are still waiting for an answer. Number 19, why build a city to escape the sun? In 1963, a man in the Cappadocia region of Turkey decided to renovate his home. He knocked down a wall in his basement. He probably expected to find a small storage space. Instead, he found a room, and beyond that room, a tunnel, and that tunnel led to more rooms and more tunnels. He had stumbled upon a lost city, not just a few caves, but a massive multi-level underground metropolis called Derinkuyu. This place is not a simple shelter. It goes down 18 stories. That's about 280 feet into the earth. It was designed to hold up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and their food supplies. It has everything a city would need. There are living quarters, stables, cellars, and storage rooms. There are chapels for worship. There are even wineries and oil presses. A huge vertical shaft over 180 feet deep acts as a main well, providing water to many levels. Thousands of smaller ventilation shafts bring fresh air all the way to the bottom. This was a fully functioning long-term settlement. The doors between levels are not made of wood. They are massive rolling stone wheels like something from a fantasy movie. Like they weigh up to half a ton each and could only be rolled shut from the inside. Once closed, they were almost impossible to open. This was a place built for defense, a place to hide. The question is, who built it and what were they hiding from? Initial theories pointed to early Christians. During the Roman persecutions and later the Arab-Byzantine wars between the 8th and 12th centuries AD, Christians in the region needed safe havens. An underground city would be the perfect place to ride out an invasion. The chapels and religious artifacts found inside support this idea. But some archaeologists think Derinkuyu is much, much older. Some suggest the Phrygians and Indo-European people started carving it out between the 8th and 7th centuries BC. They were skilled architects, but they also had enemies. Hiding underground would have been a good strategy. There's even a wilder theory. It links the city to the ancient Zoroastrian prophet Zarathustra. In a Zoroastrian text, the god Ahura Mazda tells a hero to build an underground vara, a shelter, to protect a select group of people and animals from a terrible world-ending winter. A kind of Noah's Ark, but underground. But no matter who built it, the logistical puzzle is immense. How did they excavate hundreds of thousands of tons of soft volcanic rock, known as tuff, using only simple tools? Where did they put all the excavated material without creating huge, obvious piles on the surface that would give away the location? And the social puzzle is even bigger. How did 20,000 people live in dark, cramped tunnels for months, maybe even years? The psychological pressure must have been enormous. It was a city without a sky, a community that chose darkness over light. It was a ritual of survival, a complete rejection of the surface world for the safety of the deep earth. What did daily life really look like? 18 floors underground. How did they manage sanitation and disease in such a confined space with so many people? What was the psychological cost of living without sunlight, perhaps for an entire generation? And if it was built to survive a single catastrophic event, what was that event and did it ever come? Number 18, what happened to America's first metropolis? Long before Columbus arrived, a massive city stood in the middle of North America. It was located in what is now southern Illinois, across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis. We call it Cahokia. At its peak, around 1100 AD, Cahokia was larger than London was at the time. It had a population of 10,000 to 20,000 people, with thousands more living in the surrounding farmlands. It was the largest and most influential city of the Mississippian culture, and then it just vanished. The heart of Cahokia was a collection of over 120 man-made earthen mounds. The largest of these is Monk's Mound. It is a terraced pyramid that stands 100 feet tall and covers over 14 acres. It is the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas. It was built by hand using baskets to carry an estimated 22 million cubic feet of soil. It took centuries to complete. On top of it sat a huge building, probably the residence of the city's paramount chief. This was a place of power, both political and religious. The city was meticulously planned. It had a central grand plaza, a 46-acre open space used for ceremonies and public gatherings. It was surrounded by other large mounds and a massive defensive wall made of wooden posts. Cahokia was also a city of ritual. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of large-scale feasting, suggesting massive community events. They also found what they call woodhenge, a series of large timber circles located to the west of Monk's Mound. These circles were used as an astronomical calendar. Posts were aligned to mark the solstices and equinoxes, crucial dates for an agricultural society. But there was a darker side to their rituals. At a smaller mound, known as Mound 72, archaeologists led by Melvin Fowler in the 1960s found a stunning burial. A high-status man, likely a ruler, was laid on a bed of over 20,000 marine shell beads arranged in the shape of a falcon. But he was not alone. Buried with him and around him were over 250 other people. Many of them were young women who appeared to have been sacrificed. In one pit, more than 50 women, all in their late teens or early 20s, were buried together. In another, 4 men were found with their heads and hands cut off. This was not a normal cemetery. It was a site of mass ritual sacrifice on a scale rarely seen in North America. The biggest puzzle of Cahokia is its end. Around 1350 AD, after centuries of dominance, the city was abandoned. By the time Europeans arrived in the area, it was empty. The great mounds were overgrown. Its memory was lost. Why did everyone leave? There are many theories. Archaeologist Timothy Paucatat suggests a kind of religious or political collapse. Perhaps a new leader or a new ideology took hold, and the old system broke down. Other researchers like Cecil Schroeder point to environmental disaster. The people of Cahokia cut down huge numbers of trees to build their city and its defensive walls. This deforestation could have led to soil erosion and localized flooding, ruining their corn crops. There's also evidence of a major flood around 1200 AD. Some suggest disease or prolonged drought. It was likely a combination of factors, but whatever the cause, an entire civilization collapsed and its people dispersed. Why was human sacrifice so central to the power structure of Cahokia? Was the Falcon Warrior a ruler, a god, or both? What specific cosmic event were the people of Woodhenge tracking with such precision, and what did they believe would happen if they stopped? And when the city finally failed, where did its thousands of citizens go, and did they carry the memory of their great city with them into obscurity? Number 17, was there a lost civilization in the waters of Japan? In 1986, a scuba diver named Kihachiro Aratake was exploring the waters off the coast of Yonaguni Jima, a small Japanese island at the southern end of the Ryukyu archipelago. He was looking for a new spot to observe hammerhead sharks. Instead, he found something that would spark decades of debate. Beneath the waves, he saw a massive terraced structure. It looked like a submerged stone pyramid. It was covered in sharp, flat surfaces, straight lines, and right angles. It didn't look natural. This underwater formation is now known as the Yonaguni Monument. It is huge. The main structure is about 165 feet long and 65 feet wide, rising to a height of 90 feet from the seabed. It's made of sandstone and mudstone. The most striking feature is what looks like a series of giant steps or terraces. Some researchers see more than just a pyramid. They point to features. They call the turtle a star-shaped platform and what looks like a road or a wall encircling part of the structure. The most prominent advocate for the theory that Yonaguni is man-made is Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus. He has spent years diving on the site and mapping it. He believes it is the remnant of a 5,000-year-old city that was sunk by an earthquake. He even claims to have found smaller stone tools and carvings in the area, though these findings are not widely accepted. The mainstream scientific and archaeological community is highly skeptical. Robert Schoch, a geology professor at Boston University, has dived the site multiple times. He argues that the monument is a natural formation. He explains that sandstone is a rock that tends to break along straight planes, creating the sharp edges and flat surfaces. He says the structures are the result of natural geological processes and erosion in an area with strong currents and tectonic activity. The region is known for earthquakes. He points out that the walls are simply natural vertical fractures in the rock, and the roads are channels where pieces of rock have been washed away. In his book Voices of the Rocks, Schoch makes a compelling case for natural origins, explaining how these features can form without human intervention. The debate is fierce. If Kimura is right, it would rewrite history. It would mean that a sophisticated monument-building culture existed in East Asia during the last ice age, a time when we thought people were simple hunter-gatherers. It would predate the pyramids of Egypt by thousands of years. It would be evidence of a lost Pacific civilization, a Japanese Atlantis. If Schoch is right, it is a fascinating geological wonder, a prime example of how nature can mimic architecture. The ritual aspect is pure speculation. If it was a city, the main monument would almost certainly have been a temple or a ceremonial platform. It's a place to connect with the gods of the sea and sky. But if it's natural, it's a place where we perform a modern ritual, the ritual of projecting our own desire for a mysterious past onto the world around us. If it is man-made, how did a Stone Age culture achieve such massive and precise construction underwater or before the sea levels rose? If it is natural, why is this specific formation so much more architectural and concentrated than any other known natural sandstone formation in the world? Could the truth be somewhere in the middle, a natural formation that was modified and enhanced by ancient people? And what other secrets might be lying just off the coast, waiting beneath the waves? Number 16, who carved 1,000 temples into a riverbed? In the dense jungles of Cambodia, near the famous temple complex of Angkor Wat, lies a river called Kbal Spean. For most of the year, it's a gentle stream flowing over a sandstone riverbed. But this is no ordinary river. The riverbed itself is a work of art. For a stretch of about 200 meters, the stone beneath the water is covered in intricate carvings. This place is known as the River of 1,000 Lingus. The carvings were created between the 11th and 13th centuries by rulers of the Khmer Empire. They are mostly Hindu religious symbols. The most common carving is the linga, a phallic symbol representing the Hindu god Shiva. They are carved in a grid pattern on the riverbed, bumps of stone arrayed in perfect rows. The idea was a powerful ritual. The water flowing over the lingus would be sanctified. It would become holy water. This water then flowed downstream to the city of Angkor. The people believed this blessed water would bring fertility to their rice paddies and prosperity to the Khmer kingdom. It was a way of turning the entire landscape into a temple. But it's not just lingus. The riverbed and the rocks along the banks are filled with other carvings. There are depictions of Hindu gods like Vishnu, shown reclining on a cosmic serpent, and Brahma, the creator god, sitting on a lotus flower. There are scenes from Hindu mythology like the story of Rama and his wife Sita. These are not crude etchings. They are detailed, high-quality sculptures carved directly into the hard sandstone of the river. The site was rediscovered for the wider world in 1969 by the ethnologist Jean Boulbet, but due to the Cambodian Civil War, it remained inaccessible for decades. It wasn't demined and opened to the public until 1998. The puzzle of Kbal Spean is one of logistics and belief. How did the carvers work? They must have diverted the river or worked during the dry season when the water level was low. Carving hard sandstone with the tools they had would have been a slow, difficult process. To create hundreds, even thousands of these detailed carvings in a remote jungle location would have required a massive organized effort. It wasn't just one artist. It was a state-sponsored religious project that lasted for generations. The ritual itself is fascinating. Most cultures build temples to house their gods. The Khmer at Kbal Spean did something different. They made the river itself a moving, living part of their worship. The act of sanctifying the water was a constant, ongoing ceremony powered by nature. It linked the divine power of the gods in the mountains directly to the agricultural lifeblood of the empire in the plains below. This wasn't a ritual you attended once a week. It was a ritual that was woven into the very fabric of their world, a constant blessing flowing through their land. The entire water supply for their capital city was, in their minds, holy water. It's a level of integrated faith that is hard for us to comprehend. Why did they feel the need to carve so many lingas? Was there a specific number they were trying to reach for the ritual to be effective? How did they manage to carve with such precision in a challenging, wet environment? And what did it feel like for a common Khmer farmer to know that the water irrigating his fields had just washed over the sacred symbols of the gods themselves? Did they believe their very food was divine? Number 15, why did they build a labyrinth for a bull-headed man? On the island of Crete, there is a place that feels like the beginning of a myth. It is the Palace of Knossos. This massive complex was the center of the Minoan civilization, which flourished from around 2700 to 1450 BC. It was rediscovered and excavated in the early 20th century by the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans. What he found was not just a palace. It was a sprawling, multi-story labyrinth of over 1,300 rooms connected by corridors and staircases. There was no clear central plan. It seemed to grow organically over centuries. Knossos was a place of immense wealth and sophistication. It had advanced plumbing and drainage systems. The walls were decorated with vibrant frescoes showing scenes of Minoan life dolphins leaping, women in elaborate dresses, and most famously young men and women leaping over the backs of charging bulls. The palace was not fortified. This suggests the Minoans were a peaceful people, or at least that they had such control over the seas that they feared no invasion. The economy was based on trade. They controlled a vast network across the Mediterranean. But Knossos was more than just a political and economic hub. It was the heart of a mysterious religion. The central puzzle of Knossos is its connection to the myth of the Minotaur. According to Greek legend, King Minos of Crete angered the gods. As punishment, his wife gave birth to the Minotaur, a monster with the body of a man and the head of a bull. Minos had his master architect, Daedalus, build an inescapable maze called the Labyrinth to contain the beast. Every year, the city of Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women as tribute to be devoured by the Minotaur. This ended when the hero Theseus navigated the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, and escaped. When Arthur Evans excavated Knossos, he was convinced he had found the labyrinth of the myth. The maze-like layout of the palace seemed to fit perfectly. The bull was clearly a central figure in Minoan religion. It appears everywhere in their art. The bull-leaping frescoes are the most famous example. This was likely a dangerous ritual sport, a public ceremony where athletes showed their courage and skill by somersaulting over a charging bull. It was probably more than just sport, it was a sacred rite. The bull represented a powerful natural force, and by interacting with it, the Minoans were engaging with the divine. The palace itself seems designed around ritual. It has large central courts for public gatherings, small shrine rooms, and sunken chambers called austral basins that may have been used for ritual purification. But did the myth have a basis in reality? Was there a real Minotaur? Almost certainly not. But myths often contain a kernel of truth. Perhaps the Minotaur was a symbolic representation of a priestly class who wore bull masks during ceremonies. Perhaps the tribute from Athens was a political reality, with young people sent to Crete not to be eaten, but to serve in the palace or as bull leapers. The ritual sacrifice may have been symbolic, or it may have been real. We just don't know. The Minoans had a written language, Linear A, but we have not been able to decipher it. Their beliefs remain a secret. What was the true purpose of the bull leaping ritual? Was it a sport, a religious ceremony, or a form of initiation? Did the maze-like design of the palace serve a practical purpose, or was it intentionally built to disorient and control visitors as part of a ritual experience? And what happened inside the hidden shrines and lustral basins of Knossos in the heart of the supposed labyrinth? What secrets are locked away in the undeciphered Linear A script? Number 14, is this where the giants danced? On the remote Isle of Lewis, in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, a circle of stones stands against a stark, windswept sky. They are the Callanish stones. They are not as famous as Stonehenge, but they are just as mysterious and, to many, more beautiful. The stones are made of Louisiane gneiss, one of the oldest rocks in Britain. They have been standing for around 5,000 years, making them older than the main circle at Stonehenge. The site is not a simple circle, it is a complex arrangement. At the center is a large monolith, about 16 feet tall. A circle of 13 stones surrounds it. From this central circle, avenues of stones stretch out to the north, south, east, and west, forming a rough Celtic cross shape. The northern avenue is the most impressive, with two parallel lines of stones creating a grand entranceway. In the very center of the circle, there is a small chambered tomb, which was added to the site sometime after the stones were erected. This suggests the site's purpose may have changed over time, from a ceremonial space to a place of burial. Local folklore has long tried to explain the stones. One legend says they are petrified giants who refused to convert to Christianity when Saint Kieran came to the island. Another story claims they are the kings of old, turned to stone. In Gaelic, the site is called Ferbraigi, which means the false men. But archaeologists look for a different kind of answer. The prevailing theory is that Callanish was an astronomical observatory. Professor Alexander Thom, an engineer who spent decades surveying megalithic sites, argued that Callanish was a sophisticated lunar calendar. He believed the alignments of the stones were used to track the complex 18.6-year cycle of the moon, including the major lunar standstill, a time when the moon appears to rise and set at its most extreme positions on the horizon. From the center of the circle, the southern avenue seems to frame the distant hills where the moon would appear during this event. The ritual connected to this would have been profound. For these Neolithic people, the sun and moon were not just objects in the sky. They were powerful forces, perhaps deities, that controlled the seasons, the tides, and the very rhythm of life. To be able to predict their movements was to have a special connection to that power. The gatherings at Callanish during a major lunar standstill must have been incredible events. People would have traveled for days to witness the moon perform its celestial dance, framed perfectly by the stones their ancestors had raised. It was a way of making order out of the chaos of the cosmos, a way of feeling a part of something vast and eternal. But the astronomical theory is not universally accepted. Some archaeologists, like Aubrey Burrell, suggest the primary purpose was not scientific observation, but social ritual. The stones created a sacred stage. The avenues guided processions. The circle enclosed the ceremony. The act of building it, of dragging these massive stones from miles away and setting them upright, was itself a ritual that bound the community together. The astronomical alignments might have been secondary, a way to imbue the sacred space with cosmic significance. The tomb at the center adds another layer. Was it always intended to be a link between the living and the dead, with the sky watching rituals performed on behalf of the ancestors buried below? Why the cross shape? It's a powerful symbol, but it predates Christianity by 3,000 years. What did it mean to them? Was the site used for a single specific lunar event every 18.6 years, or was it used for more frequent seasonal rituals? And what happened during these ceremonies? Were there chants, offerings, feasts? What did the world look like through the eyes of someone standing in that circle 5,000 years ago, watching the moon rise exactly where the stones told them it would? Number 13, who were the sun worshippers of the Egyptian desert? About 60 miles west of Abu Simbel, in a remote and desolate corner of the Egyptian Sahara, lies a place called Nabta Playa. Today, it is one of the driest places on Earth, but 10,000 years ago it was different. Seasonal rains or monsoons created a large lake. This lake attracted people, and these people built something remarkable. They created what might be the world's oldest astronomical observatory. Discovered in the 1970s by a team of archaeologists led by Fred Wendorf, Nabta Playa consists of a collection of megalithic stones. They are not huge like the stones of Stonehenge, but their arrangement is what matters. The most significant feature is a small stone circle, about 12 feet in diameter. Within the circle, there are two pairs of stones that form a line, and just outside it, there are other pairs of larger stones that form other lines. In the 1990s, the archaeoastronomer J. McKim Malville and his colleagues studied these alignments. They found that one of the main lines of stones would have aligned perfectly with the rising sun on the summer solstice around 6000 BC. Other stones seem to align with the constellation Orion. This is staggering. It means that people were making precise astronomical observations thousands of years before the first pharaohs of Egypt, and long before similar structures appeared in Europe. These were not farmers. They were semi-nomadic cattle herders. The people of Nabta Playa lived in organized villages with wells and storage pits. They herded cattle, which were likely a central part of their culture and perhaps their religion. The site includes a number of tumuli, which are burial mounds, but when archaeologists excavated them, they did not find human remains. They found the remains of cattle, buried in elaborate clay-lined chambers. This suggests the cattle were not just food. They were sacred animals worthy of ritual burial. The entire site seems to be a ceremonial center. The seasonal lake of Nabta Playa would have been a place of life in the harsh desert. People would have gathered there when the water was present. The stone circle was likely the focus of their rituals. The summer solstice would have been a critical day. It marked the beginning of the monsoon season, the return of the rains that filled the lake and brought life back to the desert. The ritual was a way to welcome and perhaps even encourage this life-giving event. The alignment of the stones was a way to know, with certainty, when that day was coming. It was a calendar made of stone. The sacred cattle were probably sacrificed as part of these rituals, offerings to whatever deities controlled the rain and the sun. The connection to later Egyptian civilization is a subject of intense debate. Did the cattle-worshipping, sun-observing culture of Nabta Playa lay the groundwork for the complex religion of the pharaohs? The cow goddess Hathor and the sun god Ra were central to the Egyptian pantheon. Well, is it possible that the roots of these beliefs can be found in this remote desert location? The astronomer Thomas Brophy has even argued, controversially, that the entire layout of Nabta Playa is a map of the sky, representing the Milky Way and key constellations, a kind of cosmic map on Earth. How did a society of cattle herders develop such sophisticated astronomical knowledge so early in human history? What was the exact nature of their cattle cult, and why were the animals given such elaborate burials? Was Nabta Playa a pilgrimage site, drawing people from across the ancient Sahara for the solstice rituals? And did the ideas born here in the desert truly flow down the Nile to become the foundation of Egyptian civilization, or was it an isolated culture that vanished when the rain stopped and the desert returned for good? Number 12. Why did hunters build a temple before they built a town? For a long time, we had a simple story about civilization. First, people learned to farm. This allowed them to settle down in one place. They built villages, then towns, then cities. With a stable food supply, they had time for other things. They developed complex religion, politics, and art. They built temples. It was a neat, orderly progression. Then, in the 1990s, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began excavating a hill in southeastern Turkey. The place was called Göbekli Tepe, and what he found there turned that entire story on its head. Göbekli Tepe is a collection of massive stone circles. It is not a settlement. There is no evidence that anyone ever lived there. There are no houses, no cooking hearths, no trash pits. It was a temple, a place of ritual. The truly shocking thing is its age. Göbekli Tepe is almost 12,000 years old. It was built around 9,600 BC. This is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It is older than the pyramids. It is older than writing, older than pottery, older than the wheel. It was built by people who were, as far as we know, hunter-gatherers. The structures at Göbekli Tepe are circular enclosures. At the center of each circle stand two huge, T-shaped limestone pillars, up to 18 feet tall and weighing as much as 15 tons. These are surrounded by smaller T-shaped pillars embedded in stone walls. These pillars are not blank. They are covered in stunningly detailed carvings of animals: foxes, boars, snakes, gazelles, scorpions, and vultures. The T-shape of the pillars is believed to be anthropomorphic, representing stylized human figures. Some have carvings of arms and hands and belts with loincloths. These silent, faceless figures stand watch in their circles, surrounded by a world of powerful animals. The implications are profound. It means that organized religion and massive coordinated construction projects came before settled agriculture, not after. In fact, Klaus Schmidt argued that it was the other way around. The effort required to build Göbekli Tepe was immense. It would have taken hundreds of people to quarry, transport, and erect these massive pillars. Hunter-gatherer bands are typically small and mobile. To get enough workers together in one place, they would have needed a reliable food source. Schmidt believed that the need to feed the workforce at this central ritual site may have been the catalyst that spurred the invention of agriculture. People started cultivating wild grasses like wheat and barley nearby, not to feed their families in a village, but to feed the workers building the temple. Religion, in this view, created civilization. The rituals themselves are a complete mystery. The animal carvings are not the animals people were typically eating. They are mostly predators and scavengers. The vultures are particularly prominent. In some cultures of the region, vultures were associated with death and the sky. They were believed to carry the flesh of the dead to the heavens. This has led to speculation that Göbekli Tepe was part of a funerary cult. Perhaps they practiced excarnation, leaving bodies on the hilltop to be consumed by vultures before burying the clean bones. But no significant human remains have been found. Another puzzle is that after about 1,500 years of use, the site was deliberately buried. The circles were carefully and completely filled in with dirt and debris. It was not abandoned or destroyed. It was intentionally entombed. Who were the abstract T-shaped figures at the center of the circles? Were they gods, ancestors, or priests? What rituals were performed that were so important they led to the invention of agriculture? Why, after centuries of monumental effort, did the builders decide to carefully bury their sacred temple and walk away? And how many other older sites like Göbekli Tepe might still be hidden beneath the hills of the world, waiting to rewrite our history all over again? Number 11. What was fed to the bottomless well? In the heart of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico stands the great Maya city of Chichen Itza. Its most famous structure is the Pyramid of El Castillo, but another feature of the site holds a darker and more profound mystery. It is the sacred cenote, or the Well of Sacrifice. A cenote is a natural sinkhole, a deep water-filled pit formed by the collapse of limestone bedrock. This one is a nearly perfect circle, about 200 feet in diameter, with sheer cliffs dropping about 70 feet to the green, murky water below. For the ancient Maya, cenotes were more than just a source of fresh water in a region with few rivers. Right? They were portals. They were believed to be entrances to Xibalba, the Maya underworld. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza was the most important of these. It was a place of pilgrimage, a place where the Maya came to communicate with their gods, especially the rain god, Chayak. The Yucatan can be a dry place. Drought was a constant threat. Pleasing Chak was a matter of life and death. And so the Maya gave these cenote their most precious offerings. In the early 20th century, an American diplomat and amateur archaeologist named Edward H. Thompson bought the land that included Chichen Itza. He had read the accounts of a 16th century Spanish bishop, Diego de Landa, who wrote that the Maya had thrown live victims, especially young women, into the cenote as sacrifices. Thompson decided to find out if the stories were true. From 1904 to 1910, he dredged the bottom of the cenote. What he found was a treasure trove. There were thousands of artifacts, gold bells, jade plaques, copper tools, pottery, and weapons. These were not things that had fallen in by accident. They were valuable objects deliberately thrown into the water as offerings. He also found human bones. For a long time, this seemed to confirm the legends of sacrificed maidens. But modern analysis of the bones has painted a more complex and disturbing picture. On a study by archaeologist Guillermo de Anda and his team, who have dived the cenote in recent years, found the remains of over 200 individuals. But the majority of them were not young women. They were children, mostly between the ages of 6 and 12. And many of them were male. Furthermore, analysis of the bones shows that many of them were not healthy. They showed signs of malnutrition or disease. Some of the skulls have been ritually killed with a blow to the head before being thrown in. This was not a simple sacrifice of the best the community had to offer. Something else was going on. The ritual was not just about throwing things in. It was a large-scale public event. The cenote is connected to the main ceremonial plaza by a sakbe, a raised stone causeway. Processions of priests, nobles, and captives would have walked this path, carrying offerings. The moment of sacrifice, as a child or a precious object hit the water and disappeared into the portal to the underworld, must have been a moment of intense religious power. It was a direct transaction with the gods, gold, jade, and human lives in exchange for rain and prosperity. Why were children the primary victims of sacrifice in the cenote? Were they seen as purer offerings, or were they chosen for some other reason we can't understand? Were the sick and weak chosen because they were already considered to be close to the spirit world? Or was it a more pragmatic, brutal decision? And what of the people who were not sacrificed, but who lived their lives in the shadow of this place? How did it feel to drink water from one cenote while knowing that another, just a short walk away, was a gateway to the underworld that consumed the young? Number 10. Why did a whole civilization disappear without a fight? In the 1920s, archaeologists were excavating in what is now Pakistan in the Indus River Valley. They uncovered the ruins of a city. It was incredibly well planned. It had a grid-like street layout, a sophisticated sewer and drainage system, and multi-story houses made of uniform baked bricks. The city was Mohenjo-Daro. It was, along with other cities like Harappa, the center of a vast and ancient civilization. We call it the Indus Valley civilization, or the Harappan civilization. It flourished around 2500 to 1900 BC, at the same time as ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. It covered a huge area, larger than its two famous contemporaries combined. And then it just faded away. Mohenjo-Daro was a marvel of urban planning. It had a clear division between a lower city, where most people lived, and a raised citadel. On the citadel was a structure known as the Great Bath. This was a large, rectangular, brick-lined pool about 40 feet long and 8 feet deep. It was waterproofed with a layer of natural tar. It was fed by a well and had a sophisticated drain. It was almost certainly not for public bathing. It was a place for ritual, a place for water-based purification ceremonies that were likely at the heart of their religion. The importance of ritual cleanliness is a feature of many later religions in the Indian subcontinent, and its origins may lie here. But the puzzles of the Indus Valley civilization are immense. The biggest is their language. They had a written script with hundreds of unique symbols found on small stone seals, but no one has been able to decipher it. We don't know what they called themselves, what their leaders were named, or what their literature said. Their beliefs are a mystery. The seals are covered in images, especially of animals like bulls, rhinos, and elephants. One of the most famous seals shows a seated, horned figure surrounded by animals. Some scholars, like John Marshall, who first excavated the site, have called this figure Proto-Shiva, suggesting a link to the later Hindu god. But without being able to read the script, this is just a guess. Another major puzzle is the nature of their society. In Egypt, we find giant pyramids and temples built for god-kings. In Mesopotamia, we find grand palaces and ziggurats. We find art depicting kings and warfare. In the Indus Valley, we find none of that. There are no obvious palaces, there are no grand royal tombs, there is very little evidence of a military or of warfare. The cities seem remarkably egalitarian and peaceful for their time. It appears to have been a civilization governed not by kings and armies, but perhaps by a class of priests or merchants, with a focus on trade and craftsmanship. And then there is the greatest mystery of their disappearance. Around 1900 BC, the civilization began to decline. The cities were gradually abandoned. The writing system fell out of use. The culture dissolved. There is no evidence of a massive invasion. Skeletons found at Mohenjo-Daro do not show signs of a final violent battle. For a long time, the leading theory proposed by Mortimer Wheeler was an invasion by Aryan tribes. But modern archaeology has found little to support this. The more likely culprit is climate change. The Indus Valley people depended on a reliable monsoon season to water their crops. Studies of ancient climate data suggest that the monsoons began to weaken and become less predictable around this time. The rivers may have changed course or dried up. This would have led to crop failure and famine, forcing people to abandon the cities and move to smaller farming villages in other regions. It was a slow, quiet collapse. Without their writing, can we ever truly know the beliefs that centered on the Great Bath? Who were the horned figures on their seals, and were they gods or shamans? How did such a vast and organized civilization function, seemingly without kings or major warfare? And what was it like to be one of the last inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro, watching the systems that had supported your people for centuries slowly crumble around you? Number 9, what message was written for the sky gods? In the desolate coastal plain of southern Peru, there is a work of art so large you can only understand it from the air. These are the Nazca lines scratched into the surface of the desert floor. They are a collection of hundreds of geoglyphs. Some are simple geometric shapes, straight lines that run for miles, triangles, spirals, and trapezoids. Others are giant drawings of animals and plants, a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, a whale, a lizard. The largest figures are over 1,200 feet long. They were created by the Nazca culture between 500 BC and 500 AD. They made them by removing the reddish-brown, iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the desert floor. This exposed the lighter-colored ground underneath. In this incredibly dry and windless climate, the lines have been preserved for centuries. The first people to study them systematically was the Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Xespe in the 1920s. But they became famous through the work of the German mathematician and archaeologist Maria Ricke, who dedicated most of her life, from the 1940s until her death in 1998, to studying and preserving the lines. The first puzzle is how they were made. How could an ancient culture create such massive and precise figures without being able to see them from above? The answer is probably simpler than it seems. Researchers have demonstrated that it is possible to create large, accurate figures using simple tools and techniques. By using stakes and long ropes, a small team could scale up a small drawing to a huge size on the desert floor. You don't need a hot air balloon to make the lines, just careful planning and geometry. The real puzzle is why. What was their purpose? There are countless theories. The first and most obvious is that they were for the gods. The Nazca believed their gods lived in the sky and the mountains. These giant figures could only be seen by them. They were a form of prayer or offering, a way to get the gods' attention. But which gods and for what purpose? Another popular theory promoted by people like Erich von Däniken in his book Chariots of the Gods is that they were runways for alien spacecraft. This idea has been thoroughly dismissed by scientists, but it captures the sense of wonder the lines evoke. A more scientific theory relates them to astronomy. Some researchers, like Phyllis Petluga, have argued that some of the lines align with the rising and setting of important stars and constellations. They could have been a giant astronomical calendar used to track the seasons and predict when to plant crops. However, rigorous statistical analysis by other researchers has shown that while some alignments exist, they are no more than would be expected by chance. Maria Ricke herself believed they had both astronomical and religious significance. Perhaps the most compelling theory today links the lines to water. Water is the most precious resource in a desert. Archaeologists have found that many of the lines, especially the straight ones, seem to point towards sources of water like rivers or underground aquifers. The animal figures are also significant. Spiders are often associated with rain in traditional belief systems. Hummingbirds are linked to fertility. It's possible that the lines were part of a complex ritual to summon water. People would walk the lines in a ceremonial procession, perhaps chanting or praying. The act of walking the sacred path was the ritual itself, a way to activate the symbol and send a message to the water gods. The discovery of broken pottery at the intersections of lines supports the idea that these were places of ritual activity. Why did they create so many different types of figures? Do the geometric shapes and the animal drawings serve different ritual purposes? Were the lines walked by everyone, or only by priests and shamans? And if they were a plea for water, did the Nazca believe their ritual failed when their civilization eventually collapsed, partly due to a massive prolonged drought? Did they look at their silent giant drawings and feel that their gods had finally stopped listening? Number 8. Who buried their dead in thousands of stone jars? On the Jiangkong Plateau in central Laos, there is a landscape dotted with thousands of giant stone jars. They are clustered together in over 90 different sites. The largest of these sites, known as Site 1, has over 250 jars. They are carved from sandstone, granite, and limestone. They vary in size, with the largest being almost 10 feet tall and weighing over 10 tons. This is the Plain of Jars. The jars were made during the Iron Age, roughly between 500 BC and 500 AD. They are mostly cylindrical with a wider bottom than top. Some have lip rims, suggesting they once had lids. A few stone lids have been found, but not enough for all the jars. Local legends tell of a king of giants named Kun Chung, who fought a great battle against an evil enemy. After his victory, he created the jars to brew and store huge amounts of lao lao, a rice wine, for the celebration. The jars were his wine glasses. Archaeology tells a different, but no less mysterious, story. The leading theory supported by excavations led by the French archaeologist Madeleine Colony in the 1930s and more recently by Australian archaeologist Julie van den Berg, is that the jars were part of a vast funerary practice. Around the jars, archaeologists have found human remains. It seems the jars were used for a multi-stage burial ritual. The evidence suggests that bodies were first left to decompose, perhaps in the jar or on a nearby platform. Once only the bones remained, they were collected and buried in a secondary location either in the ground, near the jars, or in smaller ceramic vessels. The jars themselves were the central monuments in these open-air cemeteries. They were markers, a place where the living could perform ceremonies for the dead. But there are so many unanswered questions. The people who made the jars left no written records. We don't know who they were or what they believed. One of the biggest puzzles is how they made and moved the jars. The stone was quarried from sites that are several miles away. Carving a 10-ton jar out of solid rock with simple iron tools would have been an incredible feat. Moving it across the landscape would have required a huge, coordinated workforce. This was not a simple culture. It was a sophisticated society, capable of organizing large-scale labor projects that span generations. Another mystery is the variation between the sites. Some sites have hundreds of jars. Others have only a few. The style of the jars also varies. Some are tall and slender, others are short and squat. This might mean that different sites were used by different communities or clans, each with their own distinct style. Or perhaps the styles changed over time. Recent research has also discovered discs of stone placed on the ground near the jars. They are carved with concentric circles or with images of humans and animals. Their purpose is unknown. They might be grave markers, or they could have had some other ritual function. The entire area is also one of the most heavily bombed places on Earth. During the Vietnam War, the US dropped millions of bombs on Laos, and the Plain of Jars was a major target. The landscape is still littered with unexploded ordnance, making archaeological work incredibly dangerous and slow. Who knows what secrets are still hidden just beneath the surface? Why go to such monumental effort to create stone jars for a burial ritual? What was the specific belief system that required this practice? Were the jars meant to be containers for the soul, or simply markers for the body's decomposition? What is the meaning of the carved stone discs? And what can the few scattered sites that archaeologists have been able to safely excavate tell us about the full extent and complexity of this lost jar civilization? Number 7. How did they build a house out of a single stone? The city of Lalibela sits in the mountains of northern Ethiopia. It is a holy city for Ethiopian Orthodox Christians. It is famous for its 11 medieval churches. But these are not normal churches. They are not built from the ground up, they are carved from the ground down. Each church is a single monolithic piece of rock hewn out of the volcanic tuff of the mountain. They are connected by a maze of tunnels and trenches. The churches were created in the 12th and 13th centuries during the reign of King Lalibela. According to Ethiopian tradition, King Lalibela had a vision from God. He was instructed to build a New Jerusalem in Ethiopia. At the time, pilgrimages to the actual Jerusalem were difficult and dangerous due to conflicts in the region. Lalibela wanted to create a substitute for his people, and so began one of the most ambitious architectural projects in human history. The process of building them is almost impossible to imagine. Workers first had to dig a massive trench, straight down into the rock, on all 4 sides of what would become the church. This isolated a huge rectangular block of solid stone. Then they started at the top of the block and began to carve downwards, hollowing out the interior to create the rooms, windows, columns, and arches. They carved the exterior to create the facades and decorations. Everything, from the roof to the floor, is part of the same original piece of rock. There are no bricks, no mortar, no joints. The most famous of these churches is Bet Georgis, the Church of St. George. It is carved in the shape of a cross and is set in a deep pit. To enter it, you have to walk through a series of descending tunnels. The scale of the project is staggering. It is estimated that it would have taken a workforce of 40,000 people to complete the churches. But local legend says it was not done by human hands alone. The story goes that men worked during the day, and at night, angels came down from heaven and took over, doing twice as much work as the men. This is how the churches were completed so quickly. For the people who built them, this was a sacred act. A ritual of construction. They were not just building a structure, they were revealing a holy form that was already hidden within the rock. The churches are still active places of worship today. They are not dead monuments. They are filled with priests, pilgrims, and ancient ceremonies. The rituals performed inside them are part of a tradition that stretches back for centuries. The maze of dark tunnels that connects the churches is part of the experience. Pilgrims move from church to church, from darkness to light, reenacting a spiritual journey. One tunnel, known as the Tunnel of Hell, is completely dark and several hundred feet long. Emerging from it into the light of a church courtyard is a powerful symbolic act of rebirth. The main puzzle is a practical one. How, exactly, did they do it? The level of planning required is immense. Once you make a cut in monolithic architecture, you cannot undo it. A single mistake could ruin the entire building. They must have had a master plan of incredible detail, yet no plans have ever been found. What kind of tools did they use? Simple hammers and chisels, but the precision of the work is flawless. There are also questions about the purpose. Why go to such extraordinary effort? Building with bricks would have been far easier. The choice to carve the churches from the rock itself must have been a deeply symbolic religious decision. It made the churches an integral part of the Holy Land they were built on. How did they manage the drainage? Carving a building into a pit creates a natural basin for water, but the churches have remained remarkably dry for 800 years. Were they really built in just a few decades, as the legends say, or did they take much longer? And what deep spiritual belief motivated thousands of people to dedicate their lives to this backbreaking, impossibly precise work of carving a new heaven out of the earth itself? Number 6. What was the Great Serpent guarding? In the rolling hills of southern Ohio, in the United States, there is a giant earthwork in the shape of a snake. It is known as the Great Serpent Mound. It is nearly a quarter of a mile long, about 1,348 feet. It is not a burial mound. It contains no artifacts and no human remains. It is simply a shape. A huge, graceful, uncoiling serpent with an open mouth that seems to be swallowing an oval-shaped mound. The mound was built by ancient Native American cultures. For a long time, it was attributed to the Adena culture, which would have made it around 300 BC. However, more recent radiocarbon dating tests in the 1990s, led by archaeologist Brad Lepper, have suggested it might be much younger, built by the Fort Ancient culture around 1100 AD. The debate over its age and its builders is still ongoing, but no matter who built it, their purpose remains one of the great enigmas of North American archaeology. The serpent is a powerful symbol in many cultures. It is often associated with the underworld, with water, with renewal and rebirth because of its ability to shed its skin. The design of the Great Serpent Mound is highly specific. The head of the snake is aligned with the setting sun on the summer solstice. The coils of its body seem to align with the rising sun on the solstices and equinoxes. This strongly suggests it was an astronomical calendar, a place to mark the changing of the seasons. The oval shape in its mouth is particularly puzzling. Is it an egg? Is it the sun? Or is it another object or creature? The ritual use of the mound is a complete mystery. Since there are no burials, it wasn't a cemetery. Since there are no artifacts, it wasn't a place of offering in the traditional sense. It was likely a place for ceremony. People may have gathered here on the solstices. They may have walked along the serpent's back in a procession. You know, the act of engaging with the mound, of following its curves, might have been the ritual itself. It was a way to connect with the cosmic forces that the serpent and its solar alignments represented. The location is also significant. The mound is built on a high plateau overlooking a creek. But what is truly remarkable is the geology of the spot. The mound is situated on the site of an ancient, massive crater, likely caused by a meteorite impact hundreds of millions of years ago. This is known as the Serpent Mound crypto-explosion structure. Is it possible that the ancient builders knew this was a special place? Did they sense something different about the land? A place where a star had fallen from the sky? Building a celestial serpent on the site of a celestial impact would be a powerful symbolic act. Frederick Putnam of Harvard University was one of the first to seriously study and preserve the mound in the 1880s, saving it from being plowed over for a cornfield. But even with over a century of study, we are no closer to knowing its true purpose. It is a piece of landscape art, a sacred text with no key to translate it. It's a silent testament to a belief system that is completely lost to us. Was the oval in the serpent's mouth the sun, and was the mound a depiction of a solar eclipse? Or was it an egg, symbolizing creation and the birth of the world? If it was a calendar, what specific ceremonies were performed when the sun aligned with the serpent's head? And did the ancient builders have a deep generational memory of the cosmic impact that had shaped the very ground beneath their feet, a memory they encoded in the form of a giant, slithering snake? Number 5. Why is a city of the gods empty? About 25 miles northeast of modern Mexico City lies the ruin of a colossal ancient city. The Aztecs, who found it centuries after it was abandoned, gave it its name Teotihuacan, which means the place where the gods were created. They believed it was a holy site, a place where the universe was born. At its height, around 450 AD, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the world with a population of over 125,000 people. It was a bustling metropolis with a complex multi-ethnic society, and we have almost no idea who they were. The city is laid out on a massive grid. Its central artery is the Avenue of the Dead, a wide road that runs for over a mile. Along this avenue are the city's most impressive structures. There is the Pyramid of the Moon at the northern end, and there is the immense Pyramid of the Sun. It is the third largest pyramid in the world, built over a natural lava tube cave that was likely a sacred ritual site. Further down the avenue is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, Quetzalcoatl. This smaller pyramid is decorated with fearsome carved heads of the serpent god and another figure, possibly a war god. The puzzle of Teotihuacan is who built it and who governed it. Unlike the Maya, they left no portraits of their rulers. There are no carvings of kings or dynasties. There is no deciphered writing system that tells us their history. The city seems to have been governed collectively, perhaps by a council of lords from different elite families. The art of Teotihuacan is abstract and impersonal. It focuses on gods and symbols, not on people. This makes the city feel anonymous, like it was inhabited by an idea rather than a people. It was clearly a city of intense ritual. Excavations at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, led by archaeologists like Saburo Sugiyama, have uncovered mass graves. Over 200 individuals, mostly male warriors, were found sacrificed and buried beneath the pyramid. Their hands were tied behind their backs. Many wore necklaces made of human jaws. This was a brutal militaristic cult. The city's power was built on warfare and sacrifice. The pyramids themselves were not just monuments, they were stages for public rituals, where thousands of people in the plazas below could watch the ceremonies performed at the top. The cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun was a place of origin, a womb from which humanity emerged, and the rituals performed there would have connected the city to the very creation of the world. And then, around 550 AD, the city collapsed. The central ceremonial buildings along the Avenue of the Dead were deliberately burned. The city was not destroyed by a foreign invader. The evidence suggests an internal uprising. The people of Teotihuacan themselves rose up and burned the temples and palaces of their rulers. Why? Perhaps the system became too oppressive. Perhaps a massive drought or famine, evidenced in the skeletons from that period, caused the people to lose faith in the rulers and priests who promised to intercede with the gods. After the burning, the city was largely abandoned. The population scattered. When the Aztecs arrived 700 years later, they found only the magnificent ruins of a ghost city. Who were the faceless rulers of this massive city? Was the lack of royal portraits a deliberate political choice to emphasize collective power over individual kings? What was the exact nature of the rituals performed in the sacred cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun? And what specific event, what final act of sacrifice or failed promise caused the people to rise up and systematically burn the very heart of their sacred world? Number 4, what lies beneath the navel of the world? In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 2,300 miles from the coast of Chile, is one of the most isolated inhabited islands on Earth. It is called Rapa Nui, but it is better known as Easter Island. The island is famous for one thing, its moai. These are the giant monolithic human figures that were carved by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500 AD. There are almost 900 of them scattered across the island. They have oversized heads, heavy brows, long noses, and enigmatic silent expressions. The moai are carved from tuff, a compressed volcanic ash from a single quarry called Rano Waraku. This quarry is a strange and fascinating place. It is still littered with almost 400 moai in various stages of completion. Some are still attached to the rock face. Others lie on their backs on the slopes as if they were abandoned in the middle of their journey. The finished moai were transported from the quarry to all corners of the island, a distance of up to 11 miles. They were erected on top of stone platforms called ahu, which served as ceremonial sites. Most of them face inland, with their backs to the sea, watching over the villages of their descendants. The first puzzle is how they were moved. The moai are huge. The average one is about 13 feet tall and weighs 14 tons. The largest one ever moved, named Paro, was 33 feet tall and weighed 82 tons. The islanders had no wheels, no draft animals, and no cranes. For a long time, the dominant theory was that they were laid on their backs on wooden sledges and dragged over a ladder-like track of logs. But this would have required a huge amount of wood. A more recent and compelling theory, supported by experiments led by archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, is that the moai were walked. By using ropes tied to the head and rocking the statue from side to side, a small team of people could shuffle it forward in an upright position. The oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people support this. They say the statues walked from the quarry. The bigger puzzle is why they were built. The moai are believed to be representations of deified ancestors. They were living faces, the embodiment of the spirits of former chiefs and important figures. The Rapa Nui believed that the moai projected a spiritual power called mana, which would protect their clan and bring good fortune, fertile crops, and healthy children. The ahu platforms were the ritual centers of the community. They were also burial sites. The moai stood guard over the remains of the ancestors, connecting the living to the dead. The competition between different clans may have driven them to build bigger and bigger moai as a display of power and prestige. The story of Rapa Nui is also a cautionary tale. When Europeans first arrived in 1722, they found a depleted society. The island had been almost completely deforested. The traditional story, popularized by Jared Diamond in his book Collapse, is that the islanders, obsessed with their statue building ritual, cut down all the trees to move the moai. This led to soil erosion, the collapse of their ecosystem, the extinction of native birds, and eventually, warfare and starvation. It was a story of self-inflicted ecocide. However, recent research by Hunt and Lipo challenges this. They argue that the collapse was less dramatic and that the introduction of European diseases and the slave trade in the 19th century were the real cause of the society's demise. The role of rats, which arrived with the first Polynesian settlers and ate the seeds of the native palm trees, is also seen as a major factor in the deforestation. Why did they all face inland, with their backs to the sea, the source of their ancestors' original journey to the island? What was the exact ritual that took place when a moai was finally erected on its ahu? And the most haunting question of all comes from the quarry of Ranaraku. Why, one day, did the carving just stop? What happened that caused the workers to put down their tools in the middle of their sacred work and never pick them up again? Number 3, how do you arrange 3,000 stones? On the coast of Brittany in northwestern France, there is a collection of megalithic sites that is unlike any other in the world. It is not a circle, or a tomb, or a single monument. It is a series of vast, parallel lines of standing stones. These are the Karnak stones. There are more than 3,000 of them, stretching for over 2.5 miles. They were erected by a pre-Celtic people during the Neolithic period, sometime between 4,500 and 3,300 BC. The site is made up of several distinct sections. The main ones are Lemenic, Kermario, and Kurliskan. Lemenic is the largest, with 11 parallel rows of stones that run for almost a mile. The stones are arranged in order of height, with the largest up to 13 feet tall at the western end and the smallest at the eastern end. At each end of the main alignments, there is evidence of a stone circle. The sheer scale of it is hard to comprehend. It is the largest collection of megalithic stones in the world. It represents an unimaginable amount of labor, sustained over many generations. The purpose of the Karnak stones is a complete mystery. There are no written records from the people who built them. Local folklore says they are a Roman legion turned to stone by the wizard Merlin. Another legend claims they are pagan soldiers petrified by Pope Cornelius. Archaeologists have been debating their function for over a century. One of the earliest theories was that they were religious in nature, great open-air temples with avenues for ceremonial processions. The layout with the stone circles at the end seems to support the idea of a ritual pathway. Another prominent theory is that Karnak was a massive astronomical observatory. In the 1970s, Alexander Thom and his son Archibald Thom surveyed the site and proposed that the alignments were an incredibly complex calendar used to track the positions of the sun and moon and to predict eclipses. They saw the rows of stones as a giant piece of graph paper on which to plot celestial movements. This theory is very complex and has been criticized by many other archaeologists as being too difficult to prove, and perhaps projecting modern scientific concerns onto a prehistoric culture. A more recent and simpler theory is that the stones were a way to honor the ancestors. The area around Karnak is rich with Neolithic passage tombs and burial mounds. The stone rows may have been monuments connected to this cult of the dead. Each stone might represent an ancestor, and the rows could be a giant, permanent army of spirits or a procession of souls marching across the landscape. The act of erecting a stone could have been a central ritual in the life of the community. The effort involved is the most tangible fact we have. People had to identify the right granite boulders, quarry them, transport them, and set them upright in precise patterns. This required social organization, planning, and a powerful shared belief that could motivate people for centuries. Whatever the ritual was, it was important enough to shape their entire world. They literally remade the landscape to reflect their beliefs. Why the parallel lines? What is the significance of arranging the stones by height? Were they really a complex astronomical calculator, or was their purpose more spiritual and symbolic? And if each stone represents a person or an ancestor, what kind of society creates a cemetery with 3,000 silent, stone soldiers standing at attention for eternity? Number 2, how do you build a temple for the winter sun? On the east coast of Ireland, in the Boyne Valley, there is a large, round, grassy mound. It looks like a natural hill, but it is not. It is Newgrange. It is one of the most remarkable prehistoric structures in the world. It is a massive passage tomb, built around 3200 BC. That makes it older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza. It is part of a complex of ancient sites called Brunaboyne, or the Palace of the Boyne. Newgrange is huge. The mound is about 250 feet in diameter and 40 feet high. It covers an acre of land. It is made of alternating layers of earth and stone. The base is surrounded by 97 large curbstones. Many of these stones, especially the one at the entrance, are covered in intricate megalithic art. The most famous symbol is the triskele, a spiral with 3 branches. Inside the mound, a long, narrow passage, about 62 feet long, leads to a central chamber with a high, corbelled roof. The chamber has 3 smaller recesses, giving the interior a cruciform shape. The construction is incredibly sophisticated. The roof has remained completely waterproof for over 5,000 years. The most extraordinary feature of Newgrange is not its size or its age. It is its precise alignment to the sun. Above the main entrance to the passage, there is a small rectangular opening. It is called a roof box. For most of the year, the interior of the tomb is in complete darkness. But for a few days around the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, something magical happens. As the sun rises, a narrow beam of light shines through the roof box, down the long passage, and illuminates the floor of the central chamber. The light stays in the chamber for about 17 minutes before retreating. This was clearly the central ritual of Newgrange. The builders engineered the entire massive structure for this one brief annual event. The winter solstice was a critical time for ancient agricultural people. It marked the death of the old year and the promise of the new. Well, it was the moment when the days would stop getting shorter and the sun would begin its journey back to strength, bringing with it the return of life to the world. The ritual at Newgrange was a way of participating in this cosmic rebirth. The light penetrating the dark womb of the earth mound was a powerful symbol of fertility, regeneration, and the triumph of life over death. The archaeologist Michael J. O'Kelly was the one who re-excavated Newgrange in the 1960s and 70s. He was the first person in thousands of years to witness the winter solstice alignment in 1967. He described the moment the beam of sunlight hit the floor of the chamber as the dramatic climax of a brilliant piece of theater. The chamber itself contained the remains of at least 5 individuals, their bones cremated and placed in stone basins. This was a tomb, but it was much more than that. It was a place for the spirits of the important dead, the ancestors, to be touched by the life-giving sun at the most crucial moment of the year. It connected the cycle of human life and death to the great cycle of the cosmos. The symbols carved on the stones are another puzzle. What does the triple spiral mean? Does it represent the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, or the sun's journey, or something else entirely? We have no way of knowing. The beliefs of the Neolithic farmers who built Newgrange are lost to us. All we have is their magnificent, silent machine for capturing the light. Why was this one specific moment of the year so important that they dedicated centuries of labor to building a monument for it? Were the people buried inside chiefs, priests, or were they symbolic sacrifices? And what ceremony was performed in the darkness of the chamber as the community waited for that 17-minute miracle of light? Did they believe their actions inside the tomb could actually help the sun to be reborn? Number one, what were they watching from the plain? It is the most famous prehistoric monument in the world. Two concentric circles of massive standing stones on a plain in southern England. Stonehenge. Its image is iconic, but it is also one of the deepest archaeological puzzles we have. It was not built all at once. It was a project that evolved over a period of 1,500 years, from roughly 3000 BC to 1500 BC. The first phase around 3000 BC was a simple circular ditch and bank, called a henge. Inside were 56 pits known as the Aubrey holes, which likely held timber posts or perhaps small standing stones. The first stones arrived much later, around 2500 BC. These were the smaller bluestone. The puzzle here is that geological analysis has shown that these stones came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away. How and why did the Neolithic people transport dozens of stones, each weighing up to 4 tons, across such a huge distance? It was a journey of incredible difficulty, involving travel over land and water. The largest and most famous stones, the sarsens, were erected around the same time. These are the massive uprights and lintels that form the outer circle and the inner horseshoe. These stones are local, quarried from about 20 miles away, but local does not mean easy. They weigh up to 50 tons each. Shaping them and raising them into position using only stone, wood, and rope is a feat of engineering that still boggles the mind. The lintel stones on top were locked together into the uprights using mortise and tenon joints, a sophisticated woodworking technique applied to stone. The ultimate question is why? Why build it? The most enduring theory is that it was a temple aligned with the movements of the sun. From the center of the circle, the main axis aligns perfectly with the rising sun on the summer solstice and the setting sun on the winter solstice. This is undeniable. Stonehenge is a solar calendar. The solstice celebrations must have been the most important rituals of the year. But was it just a calendar, or was it something more? In recent years, a team of archaeologists led by Mike Parker Pearson has put forward a powerful new theory. They have been excavating a large settlement nearby at a place called Derinkuyu Walls. They found the remains of hundreds of houses and evidence of massive feasting. They believe this was the land of the living, a place of celebration. Stonehenge, in contrast, was the land of the dead, a place to honor the ancestors. The avenue leading from Stonehenge connects to the river Avon. Parker Pearson believes that funeral processions would have traveled down the river from Derinkuyu Walls to Stonehenge. The stones were a monument that connected the world of the living with the world of the spirits. The blue stones from Wales may have been brought because the ancestors of these people originated from there. It was a way of bringing the ancestral home to their new land. There is also a theory that Stonehenge was a place of healing. The blue stones were believed to have magical or healing properties in ancient folklore. People may have made long pilgrimages to Stonehenge to be cured of their ailments. The number of bodies found buried at the site with signs of severe injury or illness lends some support to this idea. Perhaps it was Neolithic lords, or maybe it was all of these things at once: a solar temple, a monument to the ancestors, and a center for healing. A multi-purpose sacred center for the entire region. What was the specific ritual that required moving 4-ton stones 150 miles from a sacred mountain in Wales? Was the solstice alignment simply a clock, or did they believe the sun's rays on that day had a special power to connect them with their dead ancestors? And when the final stone was put in place and the great temple was complete, what did the builders believe they had achieved? What power did they think they had locked into that circle of stone?